Looks like I'm live. Cool. I'm live on YouTube and Facebook. Now let me get live on Instagram and we'll get started. All right. Now, for those of you that have never seen me before, if this is your first live or your first view on however you're seeing this content, I am DT2 Comics Chat. I have been reading comic books since I was 4 years old. They're one of the things I grew up reading. I love them. I loved them my whole life. I'm also a writer. So I've written my own comic books and fantasy novels and also write children's books. So I'm going to put the link to my books in the description box below so you can check out some of the stuff I've written. So every week I come out here and I talk about what's caught my attention in comic world this week. And like I said last week, I don't cover everything because everything doesn't interest me. And because, there's just so much stuff popping off all the time. So rather, I come out here and talk about the stuff that caught my attention for the week, the stuff that I think makes a difference. So we're going to look at today. Hold on, I want to actually put it on the screen. So what we're going to talk about today is this right here. What we're going to talk about is Batman and Superman, what's going to happen. Batman and Superman, what's going to happen. Now, what do I mean by that? That will be clear to you as the broadcast goes on. Okay? So first, we're going to start out with an article that I'm sure most of you have seen, but I'm going to bring it up anyway because it is the beginning of our discussion. Okay, you should be able to see that. Move that out the way. All right, I'm going to try and blow it up just a little bit, hopefully to make it easier for you guys to read. All right, there we go. So the article we're going to start with is entitled Warner Brothers Discovery Puts Itself Up for Sale. Subtitled, the company previously said it would split in two. Now, if you don't know anything about that backstory, they've been trying to find a way to revitalize is not the word, maybe just save Warner Brothers and Warner Brothers Discovery because they haven't been doing well. And they wanted to make a difference between like the movie division and other divisions and the streaming division and other divisions. And then also the division, the publishing division that owns DC Comics. They were thinking about splitting all that at least in half, probably more, and maybe parsing out the assets. Okay. But now they've changed that position and it looks like they're putting the whole thing on the block. Look like the whole thing's up for sale now. So let's go through this article and we'll see what it's talking about. Warner Brothers Discovery, the owner of HBO, CNN, and other streaming and studio businesses. You didn't know that Warner Brothers owned HBO and CNN, did you? Said Tuesday it is putting itself up for sale. So that's why all the DC or most of the DC content is on HBO. In a press release, the company announced a review of strategic alternatives to maximize shareholder value, which is Wall Street speak for scale. I was going to say, that's some word salad. It means we finna cut this thing loose. Okay, Warner Brothers Discovery said it had recently received unsolicited interest from multiple parties for both the entire company and Warner Brothers alone. I don't believe a word of that. I don't believe that it was unsolicited. I don't believe it was unsolicited interest. I think that the parties that play the game on that level can smell the blood in the water. Okay. Now, I'm going to mention it many times in this broadcast, but why? Why hasn't, particularly the DC-based movies, why haven't they done well? The Snyderverse stuff, Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, Justice League, The Flash. Aquaman did really well. Aquaman made $1 billion, the first one, not the second one. But in general, that stuff really hasn't been profitable or really, loved by fans. Not that it didn't make money, but it wasn't the killing that they wanted it to be. Especially this last movie with The Flash with Ezra Miller. Why? Why hasn't that stuff been doing well? Well, we as fans, we know why, but they won't listen to us. Okay? The reason that stuff hasn't been doing well is because they adopted the most backwards business model I've ever seen in my days. I've never seen a more backwards, nonsensical, counterintuitive, shooting yourself in the foot, working against your own best interests business model in my days on this planet. I've never seen anything like it. They adopted a model of, because it used to be the motto or the number one rule of business was the customer is always right. Meaning you're there to serve the customer. You're there to give the customer what they want. You're trying to give them value for time, emotional energy, and money. You're asking them for some time. You're asking them for emotional investment when you're talking about IP, like superhero IP or any kind of IP, time, emotional investment, and money. In exchange for what you're asking for, you're supposed to give them some value in return. And the customer was always right. Meaning if they weren't happy with what you were serving up, you had to work on it until you gave them what they wanted. Okay? But that was back in the day. What's happened now is they have completely rejected that model. Wait a minute, am I live? Yes, I'm live on Instagram. I'm like, I want to be sure I clicked all my buttons. They have completely rejected that model and gone with this one instead. Instead of giving the customers what they want, they are now producing, the writers, producers, directors, and execs, now they're making what they want and then calling us names if we don't like it. That's the business model for the last 10 years. They said we're no longer going to make content that the fans would want. We're no longer going to make content to try to please the fans. Rather, we're going to throw out the people that made us rich, the people that have supported our superhero IP for the last 40, 50 years. And now we're just going to make content that we like. And we're going to call our customers names if they don't like it. Okay? How else would you bring a multi-billion-dollar company to the point where it's got to be sold if it hadn't lost a considerable amount of value and if they're not trying to cut their losses before it gets worse? Would you sell a golden goose? I just want you to think about that now. Would you sell a golden goose? If the golden goose was laying eggs for you every day, would you sell that? So why are they selling Warner Brothers Discovery? Why? Okay. So WBD houses a variety of media businesses, from cable networks and news outlets to popular franchises, movie studios, and streaming platforms. The company also holds the rights to broadcast a range of sports internationally, from the Olympics and the French Open in Europe to the Premier League in the UK. Now look at that. Look at all of the assets under their roof, from the media businesses, cable networks, that, get to host the Olympics or whatever. I mean, good grief. Their superhero IP alone is worth billions. The reason it hasn't produced billions is because they don't know what to do with it. And I just told you why. Okay. The company said that while it shops itself around, it will continue to work on the previously announced split of its cable networks from streaming and studio businesses. I still don't believe that. I still don't believe that's actually going to happen. If it's going to split up the cable networks from the streaming and studio businesses, which one is losing money? Which one is the least profitable? Why do they need to separate them? Are they so profitable that they need to make them their own companies and focus resources on growing it? Or are they trying to cut their losses? Is there something cancerous that's draining the life out of the other aspects of business? Okay, Warner Brothers Discovery shares surged on the news, rising more than 10%. If you don't know anything about the stock market works on hope, belief, speculation. Okay, so this was a great way to raise their stock value and raise some more capital if they're saying they're going to split this stuff off. But again, if that means, if people are excited about that news, that means there's something in there that's kind of a corpse in the cargo. It's kind of something that's causing a stench that's bringing everything else down that they want to get rid of. What might that be? I wonder. The move comes as the media industry has continued a years-long consolidation effort, sparked in part by changes in consumer habits, most notably the rise of internet-based competitors such as Netflix and the decline in cable TV viewership. Why have our consumer habits changed? And why is there a decline in cable TV viewership? A lot of it was the pandemic. We got used to staying home, that's for sure. But there's been a plethora of streaming services that broke out and that they've been trying to get your money, get your attention for years now. Well, when you have a streaming service, then that guts a lot of the motivation from going to the theater. If you go to see a movie in the theater, it's because you want the experience of seeing that movie in the theater. And it's just not as special as it used to be, number one. Number two, there aren't that many good movies that are worth experiencing on the big screen like that. Any deal for part or all of the company would be a sizable one. As of Monday's closing of trading, Warner Brothers Discovery had a market value of more than $45 billion. It also carries billions of dollars of debt on its balance sheet. So what is the equity in the company? If its valuation is $45 billion, but it's got billions in debt, then its equity is $45 billion minus their debt. It doesn't say how much debt they have, so we don't really know what it's worth on paper. So the $45 billion is just a valuation, but you got to subtract the debts from that. WBD studio businesses could be attractive to another studio owner, streaming or tech company. Okay, I got to stop the article right there. If that's the case, why hasn't WB been able to do anything with all those assets? They don't know what they're doing with them, that's why. And what confidence do we have that another company would know what to do? Remember when Disney bought Lucasfilm and everybody kind of rejoiced because we thought it was going to be great having Lucasfilm and the Star Wars brand underneath the House of Mouse control. Do you remember that? What happened? Okay, it has released a number of recent box office hits, really, and holds the rights to Harry Potter and DC Comics heroes such as Superman, as well as other popular franchises. Okay, well, Harry Potter is worth billions. Why are they selling it? Comcast, which owns NBC News parent company, NBC Universal, is one of many companies likely to take a look at Warner Brothers. Discovery's assets, two people familiar with the matter told NBC News. I read that sentence wrong. Warner Brothers Discovery's assets, two people familiar with the matter told NBC News. But the company currently has a high bar for a deal, they said. In September, rival Paramount Global was preparing a bid for all of WBD, but that appeared to stall in recent weeks. They are trying to cash out while it looks like they still have some real value. Again, like I showed you before, the article lists their valuation in a clear number in terms of their asset valuation, but it doesn't list what their debts are. If they have 45 billion assets and they're $40 billion in debt, they're only worth 5 billion. So notice the article didn't get specific with the amount of debt they carry. So if they're balking at these other people buying, it's because they're trying to drive the price up. They're trying to cash out at as high a price as possible. Tuesday's news injects fresh uncertainty into WB's business, which in recent years has gone through a series of changes. That's an understatement. In the early 2000s, when it was known as Time Warner, the company was transformed by a string of deals that included spinning off Time Warner Cable and Time Magazine. In 2014, the company faced a takeover bid from Rupert Murdoch's News Corp, which was later withdrawn. Whenever I think about Rupert Murdoch, I think about like the real life Daily Planet. AT&T acquired Time Warner in 2016 for $85 billion, merging it with some TV assets that it already owned. $85 billion is what they paid for it. But that deal faced a years-long battle with the Justice Department, which sought to block it on antitrust grounds. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with antitrust laws, long story short, it makes it illegal in America to form a monopoly. One person or one company cannot completely corner the market of any market, because if they do, if they're the only people you can get the content from, then they will drive the prices through the roof because you got nowhere else to go. So that's why in America, things always boil down to a big two, like a Coke and a Pepsi, like a McDonald's and a Burger King, that kind of thing, like a AT&T and Verizon. That's why that happens. So they can all say, well, we don't have a monopoly, that kind of thing. Okay. So AT&T ended up spinning off the company in another deal, which set the stage for a 2022 merger with Discovery. Everybody remember that? It was just 3 years ago. In June, Warner Brothers Discovery announced its latest deal, which will ultimately cleave off HBO and its HBO Max streaming platform, along with Warner Brothers Studio and DC Comics, into a new company. Now, remember, they tried to rebrand HBO into HBO Max. You remember that? Remember how everybody was just used to it being HBO, and then they did this big rebranding push to make it Max, HBO Max. You remember that? And then they ended up going back to say, okay, well, we're just going back to HBO or HBO Max. Why? What was the point of that? So the reason I'm bringing this stuff up is because it seems to indicate a pattern of them not knowing what they're doing. That's what I'm trying to point out. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. Okay. They've got tens of billions of dollars worth of viable assets that could be bringing in, double, triple, quadruple, quintuple its valuation, but they don't know what to do with it. Okay. Why would you even do a rebranding strategy for HBO? What was wrong with it? There's nothing wrong with it. Everybody's cool with it. Then this big push to it's now Max. Then now it's HBO again, HBO Max, whatever. What was the point of that? See, they don't know what they're doing. Okay. But they wanted to spin off Warner Brothers Studio and DC Comics into a new company. Now that right there is where I think the crux is. That's, I think, the thing that's maybe the corpse in the cargo. Maybe they haven't been able to turn enough of a profit with Warner Brothers Studio and DC Comics. And maybe they're trying to cut that out to try to make the other assets more profitable. That's what I think the key is. Not that the studio assets and the comics aren't worth much, because they are, but they haven't been able to get a hit. Snyderverse itself. Not that it didn't have, some good points, but by and large, it was divisive, because Snyder's sensibilities aren't right for the DC pantheon of heroes. They should have given Snyder Justice League Dark or The Outsiders. But the mainstream, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, all that, that's not where his sensibilities lie as a director. If they were going to give Zack Snyder anything, they should have given him Justice League Dark with Dead Man, Martian Manhunter, Zatanna, Etrigan, Swamp Thing. See, that would have been, his thing. Same thing has happened with James Gunn. James Gunn's sensibilities as a studio head and a director don't fit the DC Comics IP. They don't fit. Gunn, instead of doing Superman, because his Superman is divisive. I think it cleared upwards of 600 million, I think. I don't think it made as much as Man of Steel. But Superman has never broken $1 billion at the box office. How can he be the most recognized and revered and known superhero property in the world, probably next to Spider-Man and Batman? They're all up there. How come Superman hasn't been able to break $1 billion, but the Avengers did? Why is that? Why did Infinity War and Endgame make all that money? Over $2 billion. Actually, both of those movies cleared $2 billion. Why is that? Because the Marvel Cinematic Universe built a story world. And especially in the beginning, before everything went woke, they told really good stories with those heroes. And they took B and C-list heroes and they made them superstars. They elevated them to A-list. Okay, Warner Brothers has always wanted that. They already have the A-list heroes. They already have Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. They don't know what they're doing. WD's latest announcements closely mirror the moves of other major media companies. Earlier this year, Skydance acquired CBS on Paramount, while in late 2024, Comcast announced it would spin off many of its cable networks, including CNBC and MSNBC, into a new company called Versant. Under Comcast's spinoff plan, the Peacock streaming platform, Bravo and NBC Broadcast Network will remain part of Comcast. Now, I wonder why that is. Why is that? Why is it getting rid of the political channels? Why is that? Because that stuff has gone belly up too. So no matter what they say and how they try to spin this, what it looks like to me very clearly is that the things that are draining money, the things that are corporates in the cargo, the things that are not healthy financially, the things that aren't making money, trying to get rid of that or whatever. But now they're wrapping it all up in a bow and saying we're willing to sell the whole thing, which is a shame because Snyder got his crack at it and just made something divisive and dark and dour and washed out and dystopian, because that's the kind of stuff he likes to do. And then here comes James Gunn, and everything he does is Creature Commandos all over again. Every time it's Creature Commandos, because James Gunn should have done The Outsiders. Or he could have done Justice League Dark as well. Either one of those. That is also more in his line. See, so they hired two directors back to back whose sensibilities don't work for the main IP content that DC Comics has. So instead of fixing the problems, putting a finger on actual problems, they said they're going to wrap it up in a bow and sell it and make it somebody else's problem. And they're going to try to squeeze as much money out of the sale as they can. Is what it looks like to me. It's just my opinion. I told you this is my opinion channel. It's just my opinion. So if all this happens, like it's poised to happen, like it looks like it's going to happen, like they think it's going to happen, if all of that happens, as it says here, then we have to hope that whoever buys it, whoever gets his hand on Warner Brothers Studio and DC Comics next, actually knows what to do with it, knows how to put out a Superman movie that everyone wants to watch, not a Superman movie where all the super is stripped out of him. He beats up every scene. He falls out the sky. Sunlight hurts him. Kara's cussing him out. He can't keep his cool in a conversation with Lois. Lex is calling out, judo moves, kung fu moves, Mortal Kombat moves, because Superman can't beat his own clone. Do not get me started on that movie. Okay. And then he follows that up with Peacemaker that has, decidedly adult content. That's the follow-up to Superman, the supposedly most family-friendly superhero out there, and he follows it up with content like that. These folks don't know what they're doing. Just as simple as that. Okay? But there's another wrinkle in this. There's another fly in the ointment. Okay? There's another monkey in the wrench. And that's what I want to talk about now. That's why I titled it Batman and Superman, What's Going to Happen? What's going to happen to them? Now, what I'm talking about, what I'm referring to here, is, of course, the fact that I started to say their copyright will be up, but that's not accurate. For people that don't understand copyright, and for people that don't understand trademark, see, they've got the wrong idea. So like what they did with Winnie the Pooh, when that, became public domain, they made that horror film or whatever. What people don't understand is that there's a difference between copyright and trademark. Copyright always has a time limit on it. So copyright normally has to do, copyright with music has to do with the life of the songwriter or songwriters when it comes to the compositions themselves. And so when it comes to the copyright of Batman and Superman, that's due to expire in a few years. But what people don't understand is what that actually means. They think what that means is that everything about them is all of a sudden going to become public domain. That is incorrect. What it actually means is that their first books will become public domain, and the only thing that anybody can do anything with is those actual first books and the version of them that appeared in those books. So for Batman, that's him with the purple gloves, and Superman, that's with the odd-shaped shield. It's only that version of them and the content of those books. Because also in Batman's first book was also Commissioner Gordon. But that doesn't mean that their whole story world is going to become available. That's what I don't think people understand. So Superman's copyright, but it's only the copyright on Action Comics #1, not the entirety of the Superman IP. That's what people don't seem to get. So the Action Comics comic book, 1938, Superman's first appearance, is going to enter public domain in 2034. So that's 9 years from now. But they have trademarks on most of the rest of Superman's story world, like Lex Luthor, Kryptonite. Kryptonite came from the radio show, by the way. The S shield, the shield that we know, because Superman's original shield doesn't look like the shield that we know now. Okay, so let me see, I'm pulling that up. Okay, here it is. Because I want to be sure you understand what I'm talking about. Okay. There it is right there. That, hey, what's up, Eric? Good to see you. I'm going to get your comments. I always read your comments after I get through, so keep the comments coming because I'm definitely going to read them. That's Superman's original shield. That right there. Okay, so that's what's going to be a part of public domain in terms of how he looked in Action Comics #1, not his whole world. Okay, so like I said, the shield that we know with the S, the one that means hope, the more modern S, Lex Luthor, Kryptonite, all that, remains under copyright and trademark protection for longer. So it means the original 1938 version will become free to use, but DC is going to retain the rights to many other iconic elements. So what people don't understand is that it's only that first 1938 appearance of Superman, the copyright on that book expires in 9 years, but not on everything about Superman as a character. Okay. Now, trademarks do not expire. Trademarks can be renewed indefinitely if you didn't know that. Copyrights expire, they have a time limit on them, but trademarks do not. So once you own a trademark, as long as you keep renewing the fee, you can own it indefinitely. Do you think that DC or Warner Brothers or whoever owns them when it's all said and done, do you think they're going to give up the trademarks that they own on Superman? Why? So all that's going to come into public domain is the first book and everything in that first book, meaning how he looked in that first book, not him in totality. Okay, what about Batman? The copyright for the original 1939 version of Batman will expire and into public domain in 2035, 10 years from now, January 2035. Okay, DC Comics is still going to retain control because the elements of Batman's world that they have a trademark on, they're still going to own. So anybody that wants to do anything with the basic elements of Batman, the original version of Bruce Wayne, his initial backstory, and Commissioner Gordon. But now you got to remember, you can't put a logo that they own on the comic, and you can't put anything DC related on it. If you make a comic about Batman in 10 years, you can't use any logo or trademark that they own, and you can't use any version of Batman that's later than the first one. Detective Comics number 27, you have to only use that version. Okay? Because remember, copyrights expire, trademarks do not. Okay, so Robin first appeared in 1940. The Joker first appeared in 1940. Alfred, even though he wasn't the Alfred we know now, first appeared in 1943, but he was kind of heavy and kind of goofy. They retconned him. And then specific gadgets like the Batarang and the Batmobile. So if you're going to use the public domain version of Batman, is he used a gun and he killed people and he had the purple gloves, and you can't use later versions of him because that's not up. So in other words, what I know people don't understand is they're going to have to toe a very strict and stringent line when Batman and Superman become available, because it's not them and the story world that's available is just their first appearance in the book. The comic book is what is in public domain. I can't stress that enough. The comic book will be in public domain. So you can take those pages, you can copy them, you can rearrange the comic book, you can retell that story. But you cannot use any trademark elements of the story world. You can't use any version of them that showed up later besides the first issue of their own appearance. And I know people don't understand that. I know people are just licking their chops, waiting to go crazy because they don't understand what's actually going to happen 9 and 10 years from now. Okay? And so this is why my suggestion, because I'm doing it, I suggest you make your own stuff. I'm making my own stuff. I got my own teams, I got my own everything. But it's not going to be the free-for-all that people think it is. And if you use anything, don't think that they're not going to be policing these YouTube streets. Don't think they're not going to be policing the internet streets. Don't think they're not going to be paying attention to everything that comes out that has Superman or Batman in it. Because if you use the logo, Superman has a very specific logo. they've used for a long time. Batman has many different ones, but if you use a logo that they have trademarked, you can't do that. So you're actually going to have to make your own, or if you can't make your own, if you're not allowed to do that, then you're going to have to use the one that was on the covers of the magazines when they first hit. See, that's what I'm trying to get you to understand, is that it's not what people think it is. It really, really isn't. So let me pull it up and be more specific. Okay, so when this becomes public domain, what that means is that you'll be able to use that version of Superman, meaning he's got to have that style shield, meaning he can't fly. Remember that in Superman's first appearance, he would take super leaps. Superman couldn't fly when he first showed up. So you can only use that version of him, and it has to look like that. And if they have trademarked the Action Comics logo, or if at this point they had trademarked any Superman logo, you can't use that. So it's really literally going to be your version of Superman that you're doing. Okay? Now, let's look at the same thing with the bat. Okay, you see that? You can only use that version of Batman. So most people don't notice that his cape on his right hand is attached to his wrist in that swinging photo. And then also he's got the purple gloves, and his utility belt has a round buckle in the center. You can only use that version of him because the comic book is what's in public domain, not Batman in totality. And anything Batman related that they have trademarked, you can't use it because trademarks do not expire. Only copyright expires, and only the copyright on the book. That's why I keep repeating it, because I want to be sure people understand that it's not going to be what people think it is. It's not going to be this free for all. It's not going to be open season on Batman and Superman. No, it's not. You can only use that version of him, and he used guns and he killed criminals. Okay? So like I said, I know there's going to be a bunch of crazy stories. I know that's going to hit. I would suggest making your own stories, because the legal trouble that you're going to get in, they're going to find a way to not let you get around their trade, the stuff that they do have trademarked and the stuff that's still under copyright. Like, you cannot feature a story with Robin in it because Robin didn't appear till 1940. So that book is not going to be up for public domain until 2 years later, in 2037. Is when Robin will become, or the first appearance of Robin will become available in the book. You understand? So like I said, I suggest you make your own, because it's not going to be what people think. All right, let me read. Now, if y'all got some more comments, let me know. I'm just seeing 3 comments. If you got some more comments, keep them coming. You know I love your comments. Captain Marvel. It's a perfect example of trademark and copyright. They can call him Captain Marvel inside the book, but Shazam on the cover. Right. So for those of you that don't know the story, it's a long, drawn out story, but long story short, Marvel kept the trademark of the Captain Marvel name and logo, but not for the Captain Marvel character that Fawcett owned and DC bought. So they trademarked Captain Marvel for their version of Captain Marvel, which we know as Marvel, and whatever logo they used for him. So the way it's shaken out, because it was a long, drawn out legal fight, the way it's shaken out is that they can't put the name Captain Marvel on any of their books, that DC can't, that feature Captain Marvel. So that's why, if you notice, most of the books are called Shazam or entitled Shazam, but there are some books that have on the cover the original Captain Marvel. So I don't know if that's like a workaround. I don't know if, since it's not just Captain Marvel as a phrase, then maybe that's the workaround, because I've seen books, I'm trying to find one now. I've seen books that have here it is. Here's one right here. Just so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Right there. Now, do you see right there, it says the original Captain Marvel? Right there on the cover. So I don't know if that's a workaround, because they're not supposed to be able to call him Captain Marvel on the cover, but maybe the phrase, the original Captain Marvel, maybe Marvel can't claim trademark rights for that. But that's why most of the time when you see the original Captain Marvel, meaning the Fawcett version where Billy Batson says his magic word, most of those are entitled Shazam. That's the reason why. And then they messed up with New 52 and they started calling the character Shazam, which is stupid, because Shazam is a wizard's name. That's the name that Billy calls out to change into Captain Marvel. And what do you call Mary Marvel? Once you change the name of Captain Marvel to Shazam, who is she now? Is she Mary Shazam? Is she Lady Shazam? It's just stupid. And what do you call Captain Marvel Jr.? Shazam Jr.? And remember that Freddie Freeman has to call out Captain Marvel's name to change into Captain Marvel Jr. So that was just a whole mess. And all the lovers of Captain Marvel can't stand New 52 Shazam. He's big with superpowers, and that's what they made a movie about. A 12-year-old boy in an adult body that is not who Captain Marvel is. Captain Marvel is Billy's grown self. So Billy, at the age of 9, 10, 11, 12, however age is depicted, when he says his magic word, he turns into his 30-year-old self. He doesn't have the mind of a child. He has the same heart, the same good nature, but he's a grown man. That truth has been lost with all this New 52, Shazam, big with superpowers, and those two dumb movies, which I, to this day, refuse to watch. But anyway, I went on a little rant there because you know how I get about Captain Marvel. He's my favorite hero tied with Batman. Okay, so with trademark, those are renewable indefinitely. You can own them forever. Copyright expiration dates. So you better believe that they're going to be watching these internet streets for anything that we're doing that includes Batman and Superman. And if we cross the lines, if we use anything that's still under trademark protection or anything that has not become public domain yet, you best believe they're going to come after you. Which I find ironic, since they obviously don't know what to do with these cash cows, but we've had more success with Batman than we have with Superman. Batman has, pound for pound, gotten more media content than Superman. And Batman has had better results. For example, The Dark Knight, the second movie of the Nolan trilogy, was the first superhero movie to crack $1 billion, if I'm not mistaken, 2008. That was the first movie, the first superhero-based IP to crack $1 billion in the box office, The Dark Knight. So Superman has never made $1 billion yet. Now, they said that the Reeve movie in 78, adjusted for inflation, might be $1 billion now, but Superman has actually never cracked $1 billion, which just amazes me. It tells me they don't know how to tell the right story with him, because why couldn't he pull in $1 billion? But Batman has. And also, you heard me talk about 2 or 3 weeks ago about, I've talked about it on Twitter too, why doesn't Superman the animated series get the same acclaim that Batman the animated series does? There's a lot of different reasons, but the biggest reason is because Superman is nerfed. Okay? And then with Batman, most of his supporting cast got the coolest upgrades, got the coolest glow-ups. everybody is better in Batman the Animated Series. Commissioner Gordon, Alfred, Nightwing, Mr. Freeze, Scarecrow, Hugo Strange, Man Bat. I mean, just everything in Batman's world got a glow up. And they also introduced Harley Quinn. Superman the Animated Series didn't really have any of that stuff on that level, which is a shame. But the point I'm trying to make, what I'm trying to tell you today, all my content creators, all those that follow me and listen to me, I still would bank on making your own content, because this is not a floodgate for you to just rush in and make your own Batman and Superman stories. You can only use the elements of them that were in their first appearances. That is what the copyright has expired on. Okay. Eric says, who bore the fan fiction stories that would be written once both of them become public domain? Yeah, people are going to go kind of crazy. And I don't know if Warner Brothers is going to catch all of them. But I guaranteed if any of them are making money, if there's any copyright or trademark violations on those, I bet you they're going to get shut down in 24 hours. I bet you. Watch. Okay. Vigilante Superman, here I come. Now, a whole lot of people want to see that. A whole lot of one. But if you didn't know it, Superman was really, really rough in his early days. He beat people up. He killed people. He got in the face of wife beaters. He was really, really rude. He wasn't a nice guy. That part of his persona has evolved over time. Like Chris Reeves said, he thought Superman should be a friend. That is not what Superman was, a champion of the oppressed when he first came out. So he fought mainly for blue collar people and people that couldn't fight for themselves. But he wasn't nice about it. Go back and read some of his earlier strips. You'll see what I mean. He's not the Superman we know, and he can't fly. Okay. Yeah, I believe you're right. Always a workaround, putting original Captain Marvel in smaller letters. Yeah, some kind of workaround, some kind of way where they get around the judgment of not using Captain Marvel in the title or in the logo. Because I just showed you a book where they call him the original Captain Marvel. So I've heard some people say they can't put it on the cover, but I just showed you a cover where it's right there on the cover. So it's some kind of workaround. Some kind of workaround. Okay. Says Batman is an infinitely cool character, objectively speaking. I agree. I agree. Batman is just cool all the way around. But I think Superman is cool, just in a different way. Unfortunately, and I talked about this before, Superman has come to, in the minds of a lot of people, represent a bit of a Pollyanna, or represent a bit of a blue Boy Scout, represent a bit of a goody two-shoes, and not really rough around the edges, which is not how he started. But a lot of people don't find that as exciting, someone who's committed to doing the right thing just because it's right. Because Batman is about scaring criminals and busting them in the face. Okay. I think Superman is just as cool, but you have to know how to write him. Okay. Eric says, it's interesting when I talk to people, they typically say Superman is not as relatable as Batman, mostly due to Batman being a regular guy with brains and tech, and Superman being too powerful. And that's a very, very, very good set of points. Now, this is stuff that I've heard a lot. I don't necessarily agree with the Batman being relatable, because there's nothing about Bruce Wayne that's relatable unless you are a hyper genius 1%er. The relatable part is that he's just human and doesn't have enhanced. He's not a metahuman. He doesn't have enhanced abilities. Although we all know Batman has some type of healing factor, because there's no way he'd be able to take all the punishment that Batman takes if he wasn't able to heal. And I keep telling people that Frank Miller revealed the healing factor that Batman has is the bat in the cave that found Bruce when he first fell in the cave. That bat, the ancient bat, that's the bat that heals him. That's how Batman is able to come back from the beatings he's taken. Because I've said it before, Batman's career would only be as long as a pro football player's, for the same reason. So Batman can only operate from his 20s to his maybe early 40s. Then he'd have to give it up because his body wouldn't, but he might not be able to go that long because his body wouldn't be able to take the punishment. But Batman has a low-key D factor. We don't talk about it. We just wink at it. Healing factor. And like I said, Frank Miller in The Dark Knight Returns showed us what it was. It's the bat in the cave actually heals him because he has some type of symbiotic relationship with that bat, the bat that found Bruce in the cave when he fell down in the cave when he was a little boy. That's why I like The Dark Knight Returns so much, because it's just so deep. It exists on many levels. It's not just Batman as a character. It's metaphysical. It's spiritual. It's a whole bunch of things. Because Batman originally adopted the bat motif to scare criminals. But The Dark Knight Returns said there's a different layer to it. He actually has a relationship with the bat that he found in the cave. The monster bat, okay? They started to touch on that in Batman Forever, but they didn't really go all the way through with it. So you just see glimpses of it in Batman Forever with Val Kilmer. Okay, so Batman being a regular guy, Bruce Wayne is not a regular guy. He's a human being. Maybe that's what you mean. Maybe that's what people mean. He's not regular. He's a hyper genius and he has hyper drive. And yes, he has brains and tech, but originally Bruce Wayne invented his own tech. It was a retcon. Lucius Fox and all them, that was a retcon. Originally, Bruce built all that stuff himself. Okay. Brains and tech and Superman being too powerful, which I don't agree with that. Y'all know I don't agree with that either. I miss pre-crisis Superman because now there's no super in that man and I can't stand it. But anyway. Popcorn Fire says, in my opinion, Superman's problem is so much being nervous that he was exposed. A good old-fashioned farm boy with the powers of a god just isn't as interesting of a story as it used to be. Maybe. It depends on how you write it. The reason the reason that they weren't able to do Tron well is because they didn't understand why Tron worked in the first place. More than anything else, Tron worked in the first place because it was so ahead of its time. The graphics, the effects, the light cycles, the whole hierarchical structure of a world inside a computer. Because Tron dropped like in 1982. So it was so ahead of its time. And it didn't do well at the box office. It developed a cult following as time went on. But they didn't understand that. So they modernized it and made it too slick and made it to everything. And most of the stuff we saw in Tron, Legacy and Ares, although it was a story most people liked, but it was cool looking, but it wasn't stuff that we haven't seen in video games much better. That was one of the main differences. And I know people don't get that because it was cool, but it wasn't groundbreaking. The original Tron, we had never seen anything like that before. Ever. Okay. So seeing that a good old-fashioned farm boy, that's not all Superman is, that is also wrong. Superman is three people. He's Kal-El from Krypton, the son of Jor-El. He's Clark Kent, the son of Jonathan and Martha, and he's Superman. And he's got different elements that feed into him. You just have people that don't get that about him and don't know how to write it. So that kind of one-dimensional, good old-fashioned farm boy, the powers of a god, is too limiting. That is not who he is. He's three men in one. He's Kal-El, he's Clark Kent, and he's Superman. And there are reasons for each dimension of those personas. You just have to have somebody that knows that and knows how to write him because he's extremely interesting. And he has more weaknesses than kryptonite and magic. So what has happened is that general opinion or belief about him has become more mainstream, but that is not who the character is. That is much too limiting. Okay. I know you hate Smallville, but I think that's the only way it worked. For the masses, I think so, yes. I think that if they wanted to kind of retool Superman into more getting mass appeal again, I think they'd have to do it like they did on Smallville. Dial in some more melodramatic elements, making more Dawson's Creek with superpowers. Um, but they did do a successful Superman show, Superman and Lois with Tyler and Bitsy Tulloch and Tyler Hoechlin. That was about them being married and raising their children. So people kind of like that. So, but they don't know how to tap into the different elements that are there with Superman. They really don't. Okay. So, regardless of how I feel about Smallville, because don't get me started on Smallville, I do agree that for the masses, I think that would work because of what people think of him. For us comic lovers, and for those that know the character, and for those that have been reading him all of our lives, if there was something more detailed and nuanced and more explorative of the different parts of his world, Superman, okay, there are many Justice Leaguers that are a child of two worlds. Superman is a child of two worlds. You could kind of say Batman is, because he's a one percenter, but he's a street level hero most of the time. Wonder Woman is definitely a child of two worlds. Aquaman is a child of two worlds. Martian Manhunter is a child of two worlds. Captain Marvel, Shazam is kind of a child of two worlds, a regular world and a magic world, a child's world and an adult world. So that duality is present with a lot of DC characters, but you have to know how to write it. And when you reduce them down to one dimension, then that's why people say they're boring and all that and blah, 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 blah. None of that is true. Okay. But I do agree, Smallvilleizing it is probably what would make it work for the masses, because that's what the majority of Normans would respond to. There's a topic for our show, David. Who are the most relatable superheroes? Now, that's a good idea. Send that to me on Twitter so I can bookmark it. That's a good idea. Maybe I do need to do a show on that. Who's the most relatable? Because that's a huge can of worms. That's not a 5-minute discussion. So I probably do need to do a show on that so we can talk about that, because that answer is going to be different for different people. Okay. Batman as a ninja counts as a superpower, I think. If you mean his training that he got from Ra's al Ghul, or as they say, Ra's al Ghul, but that's not how you say it in Batman Begins. He wasn't always just trained by them. His original story actually was that he trained himself, and then it got retconned to where he went around the world and studied with all these people. And then Batman Begins made it to where he was in the process of studying around the world, and then Ra's al Ghul found him and, taught him the ways of the ninja or whatever. So, but it is cool, no doubt. No argument there. Most relatable is Peter Parker, hands down. We could talk about that, but I think that's a well-spoken point, because I think that's the whole idea behind Peter Parker. See, DC heroes have always been about the hero, and then secret identity was just there to hide the hero. So DC, I know I'm overgeneralizing. DC has been more about gods pretending to be people. Marvel's the other way around. Marvel is about people who got superpowers and their lives didn't get better, because most Marvel origin stories are very, very tragic and accident-based if you think about it. Captain America is the only one that was created on purpose. Iron Man, accident-based. Fantastic Four, accident-based. Spider-Man, accident-based. Hulk, accident-based. Doctor Strange, accident-based. So Marvel was about regular people that you grew up with, regular people you went to high school with, that had some type of accident or tragedy in their lives, and they got enhanced abilities as a result, but they still had problems. So that's kind of the core of Peter. Peter is a 15-year-old, and he's dealing with everything that comes along with being a sophomore in high school, and then all of a sudden, he's got these spider powers. So yeah, he was kind of conceived. Remember, the DC heroes were conceived as the heroes. Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman were conceived as their heroic selves. Then secret identities were added. Marvel heroes, both at the same time. Marvel heroes were conceived as people. that had an accident and became the super persona. Okay. I honestly can't think of anyone more relatable than Peter. Yeah. Dick Grayson, Billy Bass, and Steve Rogers all in their own way. Yes, I agree. There's elements to each one of those characters. So I think I do need to do a show about this because this is a really good topic. But it's going to take more time than I have now. Okay. Possibly Grayson, possibly be a debate. Yeah. You might be onto something because it seems like the Lois and Superman stuff always does seem to appeal to the masses. They've only done it twice, but it worked both times. Yes. So Terry Hatcher and Dean Cain, Lois and Clark, that was the biggest show on TV for a while. And went bad once they got married. They called that the Moonlighting Curse. But for a while, man, that was the hottest thing on TV. And then on the CW with Tyler and Bitsy, that one worked really well. So that, I think, gives it a more relatable frame because people relate to the falling in love, the will they, won't they, and people like that, the drama that comes with that. And then on the Tyler show, Superman basically having to deal with all the problems of adult life with a family. So that was kind of a new light. He's been that way in the comics for a while, but on TV, that was new. Okay. Stanley specifically was Spidey, someone who was a teen, because teens were all sidekicks back then, just made him the most untrodden. You really feel for him. Yeah. So back in that day, that's right. The teens were never the main character. The teens were always a sidekick, starting with Robin. So Stan Lee flipped the trope on its ear and made the teen the hero. So yeah, okay, I like this. So I like this a lot. So I need to do an hour on this. This will be really good. I will let you guys know when I'm going to do that. I might just do it next week because this is really, really cool. But remind me on Twitter because I need to bookmark and I need to put it in my notes so I don't forget, because we really do need to have a good debate on which hero is most relatable and why they're so relatable. Because I think, I could be wrong, and I talked about some of it this morning, I think that's a large part of the problem with Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman's iconic, and Wonder Woman's really, really fun to watch, but she's not relatable on any level. Can you relate to Diana of Themyscira? But yeah. Okay, send me a reminder on Twitter, right? Popcorn says, I call dibs on Peter. Bring it. Send me a reminder on Twitter. That's great. You know what? Let me write myself a note. Let me pull up my note app and remind myself I need to do a live stream on relatable superheroes. Thank you guys for that, because you are right. That's a really good topic. And we really need some time to really dig our teeth into it and see what's to it. Okay, so that's going to be it for me today. So I appreciate all of those of you that watch me live. Don't forget to like this video and share it. If you're watching it on a replay, leave me some comments below because that helps the algorithm. Thanks everybody that watched me live and gave me comments. That helps too. I'm going to put a link to my books in the description box below. So if you want to check out any stuff that I've written, because I got some more stuff coming up, you can check that out as well. And this has been great. This has been really, really great. That's why I do these live streams, because I love talking to my peeps, and I love this kind of stuff. I love this stuff since I was 4 years old. And we really got a lot to look forward to in the next 9 or 10 years. I think it's going to be a bit of a mess, but it's going to be an entertaining mess. That's for sure. All right. That's it for today. I'll see you guys. I'll see most of you guys on Twitter. DT2 Comics Chat out.